Well, folks, this is it. After months of slowly hiking and road tripping our way up the Appalachian Mountains from Alabama, we've arrived at our final destination, the Long Range Mountains, which parallel the west coast of Newfoundland. Our home for September is Rocky Harbor, a small community totally surrounded by Gros Morne National Park. On one of my first hikes along the Rocky Coast, I discovered a portal to a hidden, magical world that quickly became my favorite place to go and sit and make observations. Tuckamore is a term used by locals here to describe the evergreen trees that grow totally sideways and weave their branches together to escape the aggressive coastal winds. This results in a nearly impenetrable, fence-like barrier of gnarly branches that is pretty much impossible to walk through unless an animal has created a trail through it already. Lucky for me, I found a dark little entrance and I knew this was my chance. I approached and paused at the arched doorway, totally convinced that gnomes or trolls or something lived inside. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness created by the canopy of interlacing branches, I noticed that the tuckamore had opened up into a dome, and I was able to stand up fully. Do you ever walk into a new environment and it feels oddly familiar, even though you've never encountered that type of setting before? That's how it felt for me. I felt like I was meant to live inside this tuckamore dome. I began to explore this fairy tale environment with its soft forest floor and an array of mushrooms that looked like they were perfectly planted by a gnome landscaper. It was utterly silent. Just outside the little doorway, the ocean winds howled fiercely, but within it was quiet and sheltered and wonderfully cozy. I sat quietly for a long time, waiting to see if creatures would emerge. After a few minutes, a black and white warbler revealed itself, hopping up and down the tree bark with sudden, jerky movements as it perused the wispy old man's beard lichen for tiny insect treats. Black and white warblers have an extra long hind claw and heavier legs that enable them to hang upside down and move around freely on the bark. I've returned to my tuckamore hideout many times this month, noting the way the mushrooms decay as time goes on and watching the ferns transform from green to gold. But almost every time I stop in my hideout, I find a black and white warbler foraging within. Later in the month, we embarked on another adventure of a much more intense variety. This route is called the Long Range Traverse, and it's a difficult 35-kilometer, 3 to 5 day backpacking trek through the bogs and barrens of the Newfoundland wilderness with no established trails and almost complete exposure. Because it's wilderness, there's strict permitting, and only 12 people total are allowed to begin their hike of the Long Range each day, so we had to reserve our spots way back in February to gain access. The trip began with a misty hour-long boat ride up a freshwater fjord called Western Brook Pond. At the end of the fjord, the boat swung around to a dock and dropped Ben and I off with our packs as the rest of the passengers continued on their boat tour. There were lots of shocked and concerned comments as we disembarked, and folks found out that we were going to be hiking our way back to Rocky Harbor from there. We were the only ones to start the traverse that day, and as we watched the boat depart, we realized just how alone we were out there. We began the hike with an arduous rock scramble up and out of the canyon. Along the way, I saw a cluster of adorable mushrooms that I'd never seen before, green jelly baby mushrooms. I later learned that this teeny mushroom is quite unique in that it doesn't have gills or pores on the underside of the cap. It produces spores in structures that are located on top of its slippery, dark green cap. We eventually emerged from the lush canyon and reached the iconic viewpoint of Western Brook Pond. The rest of our 4 days were spent trudging through knee-deep mud. We probably fell down about 20 times each, reveling in the pristine scenery that's dotted with hundreds upon hundreds of perfectly clear lakes and ponds, getting to know the tiny plants that grow along the way like horned bladderwort, and hanging out on the natural white sandy beaches that border some of the lakes. We learned that moose also like sunbathing on white sandy beaches and found their tracks at every single one. It was beautiful and clear for 2 days and rained steadily for the other 2, and at one point we spent 16 hours straight in the tent because the wind chill and rain made it quite painful to be outside. Non-nature highlights this month included visiting a fall festival with traditional fiber arts demonstrations and attending an incredible potluck with ultra-welcoming locals and amazing traditional music. Most of the music has a strong Celtic influence, which I love.
Well, my pretty little girl, I must sail away.
A couple of days ago, we drove up to the northern tip of Newfoundland, where we took the much-anticipated hike out on a cliff that juts into the Atlantic, the official end of the International Appalachian Trail of North America. We did it! We traced the Appalachian mountain chain in one continuous road trip from its start in the Cheaha Wilderness of Alabama all the way up to its final peak in the Long Range of Newfoundland. As I stood there on the cliffs, I expected that I might feel sad that this adventure had come to an end. But I didn't feel that way at all. Instead, I had an overwhelming realization that this was only the beginning of my attempts to get to know these mountains more intimately. Because even after all these hikes this year, and after all these days of sustained attention to the little plants and animals and mushrooms around me, I know that I'm just barely getting started. There is so much to notice and wonder about and gain inspiration from, and even multiple lifetimes wouldn't be enough. Above all, I feel grateful that nature provides us with a wellspring of never-ending discovery and joy if we just take the time to notice. Just a few more days now, and we'll be on our way back home to West Virginia. I've decided to continue creating a monthly vlog like this one to share my art and adventures back home. And next month, I'll share about what's next for me as I continue my work on this book project and settle back into West Virginia life. The book that will feature over 100 artistic profiles of small and often overlooked plants, animals, and fungi that I've personally encountered during these travels will be published by Mountaineers Books in 2024. It will be like a cross between an adventure memoir, field guide, and art book. This whole project has come straight from my soul, and I can't wait to share it with you.